Before we get into the subject of today's video, I would like to take the opportunity now to thank all those new people that have subscribed to this channel over the last 2 weeks. Now, the subject of today's video is going to be about how my government is going about tackling racial inequality after an audit told them that there was a disparity that needed addressing. My government is going to look oh so virtuous doing this. Money from dormant bank accounts to be used to tackle racial inequality. Ethnicity should not affect anyone's ability to get on in life, Theresa May has said. Now, it took me a few minutes to finally realise that this meant bank accounts for those who either have no surviving relatives or they themselves are deceased, or person who is alive that is entitled to it hasn't claimed it. That money was what was considered dormant, and that would be what is being raided. I vaguely remember seeing a TV show where people went out of their way to find descendants of people that had died so that that person could then have their inheritance given to them. If they're unsuccessful, of course, then where does the money go? Around £90 million from dormant bank accounts will be used to tackle high rates of unemployment among young people from ethnic minorities, Theresa May has announced. This already raises a few alarm bells, and the most obvious one being you're pandering to communities that have separated themselves from the wider community, and now because things haven't worked out, they're playing victim. That sounds like a callous way of saying perhaps if people integrated better or maybe allowed for gentrification in communities where gang violence was rife. That's not to say there isn't gang violence in white communities, it's just quite uncommon to say white communities, because apparently that's a bad thing, you nasty white people. Youth joblessness blights communities and too much talent and potential is being wasted, the PM said. It comes after the Premier warned public services they must explain or change significant differences in the way people of different ethnicities are treated after publishing the findings of a racial disparity audit in October. We are going to be looking at the racial disparity audit, and I think it's quite interesting. There are differences. Yes, there are, but I think far too much fuss is being made, and I think certain other factors like where people live play a part. For example, this kind of nonsense would exclude those who are white in predominantly rural backgrounds, because you're not going to find anywhere near as many ethnic minorities in those particular areas of the country that are more rural, and that's not me being racist, that is, well, pretty much a fact. Mrs May met young people during a visit to the Birmingham branch of UK youth unemployment charity Street League on Monday. She said, "When I became Prime Minister, I commissioned the race disparity audit precisely to ask the question, what is happening across the country? Some of the results were uncomfortable reading, but they cited injustices that we need to address. And I hate to point this out, while you have commissioned an audit for the entire country, you need to localize it rather than generalize it. Because by generalizing it, you are isolating white people as if they get it easy. And that sounds like a straw man, I know, but that's basically how this could easily be interpreted when you're only pandering to, quotes, ethnic minorities. That's why today we are launching a new program recognizing that young people from other ethnic groups are twice as likely to be unemployed as their white peers." We will get to this, because I think that's quite an assertion. Yet again, I have to state, I believe location plays a crucial part in this, but also the fact that separating communities generally harm themselves by separating themselves racially. That said, it's what people do. She added, "Evidence from the race disparity audit clearly shows that while the educational attainment gap between people of different backgrounds has narrowed over time, this has not been reflected in getting jobs. I would love to know, and obviously we will find out soon enough, if the audit covers things like choice of career, because I do think that's important. Talent, ability and hard work should be the only factors affecting a young person's ability to get on in life, not their background or ethnicity, which is an assumption. Let's not forget here, we have equal opportunity in this country. What you're now trying to do is make it seem like you're pushing for equality of outcome, which I think is dangerous. That's not equality, that's as bad as affirmative action in current year or racial quotas. It takes away meritocracy entirely. Actually, it takes away equality entirely. It denies people jobs based on their race, which makes you no better than the man opposite you that panders at every opportunity. So now let's have a little look at the audit. So the Race Disparity Audit is a 58-page PDF that I will link in the description. We will focus on employment. We might have a little sneaky look at crime as well. Labour market, participation and income. This section reviews data on employment, unemployment, income, benefits and residence in areas of deprivation. Employment. For all ethnic groups, the majority of adults working aged 16 to 64 were employed, either as an employee or self-employed. People who identified as other white had the highest rate of employment, with 4 out of 5 people of working age employed in 2016, followed by white, British and Indian people, of whom around 3 out of 4 work age people were employed. The employment rate in the Pakistani and Bangladeshi group was much lower, with just over 1 in 2 adults of working age in employment. Furthermore, over 1 in 5 working age adults in this group were self-employed, the highest proportion of any ethnic group. I believe this table is somewhat self-explanatory. I hope it makes it simple for you. The gap between the employment rates of the ethnic minority population and the overall population was closed by 0.6 percentage points since 2015 to 10.1 percentage points in 2016. In comparison with white British people, whom 1 in 25 adults aged 16 and over were unemployed, black people, Pakistani and Bangladeshi people, and those who identified as mixed were the most likely to be unemployed, around 1 in 10. I don't want to be the rudest person in the room right now, but I have to throw in the facts that we have had quite a lot of people migrate to this country over the years, quite a large number of whom were non-white. Quite a large number of those also never looked for work. They came here as economic migrants at best, but instead lived off our welfare state, a number of whom preached quite a lot of intolerance and hate and isolated themselves within their own communities. One particular community, very faith-based, has Sharia courts in this country. Ooh, have I given away who it is yet? But it does take 2 of those particular ethnic groups. Nearly 2 out of 5 working age people in the Pakistani and Bangladeshi group were economically inactive. I like that it has group. In addition to this group, those from other Asian backgrounds and those who identified with the other ethnic group were also more likely to be economically inactive than white British people. I've already stated the fact that comes into play, so I have to point out now that if you just go back 30 seconds I will have already said it. But also the fact that white people make up the dominant race in this country, so that's not surprising at all. In all 9 regions of England and in Scotland and Wales, white adults of working age were more likely to be employed and less likely to be economically inactive than working age adults in other ethnic groups. That's fine. As we see from this pet project that the government is pushing, they're trying to deal with this. My only concern is that by doing this, they're going to try and create racial quotas in a way to discriminate against white people, preventing them from getting jobs based on skin tone, all the while denying someone who might be better qualified just because they're white a job. And I say might because obviously it's not all instances. Around 1 in 4 white people who were in work were in the 3 lowest skilled occupations, a lower rate than most other ethnic groups. Pakistani and Bangladeshi workers were more likely than workers in other ethnic groups to be concentrated in the 3 lowest skilled occupation groups, with more than 2 in 5 Pakistani and Bangladeshi workers in these lower skilled occupations. Pakistani and Bangladeshi workers were also concentrated in certain industries, with more than 1 in 4 employed in distribution, hotels and restaurants, and 1 in 5 in the transport and communications industries. That doesn't surprise me anywhere near as much as it should. Conversely, Indian people in work were most likely of any ethnic group to work in the highest skilled occupational groups. You don't suppose that has anything to do with the Indian people in this country working harder and quietly getting on with things without making a big bloody fuss about discrimination now, do you? Not even a joke. The majority of the Indian people I know have worked incredibly hard to get to where they are. I would also add Sri Lankan people to that. Participation of men and women. Among people of working age in each ethnic group, men were more likely to be employed than women. That's not a shock. Quite a lot of women have children and then become stay-at-home parents, or take up part-time jobs instead. In 2016, around 88% of men who identified as other white were in employment, as were 81% of Indian men compared with 79% of white British men. Similarly, 73% of women who identified as other white were in employment compared with 71% of white British women, with just 35% in employment and 59% economically inactive. Shocker. So the part that obviously the government is focusing on, participation by age, not just race here of course, but of course race is being used for this, so yes, actually race as well. Just over half of people aged 16 to 24 were employed in 2016, a lower employment rate than among older adults in both the 25 to 49 and 50 to 64 year age groups. Young people were also more likely to be unemployed or inactive than the older age groups. You don't suppose that has anything to do with the number of them being in education, do you? For example, among 16 to 24-year-olds, 12% of white people were unemployed compared with 23% of people in other ethnic groups. The inactivity rates of 16 to 24-year-old and 25 to 49-year-old white people were correspondingly around half of that of those in other ethnic groups. Young people aged 16 to 24 of other Asian background had the lowest employment rate and the highest rate of inactivity, but young people from a mixed ethnic background were the most likely to be inactive due to being in full-time education. Clearly that race mixing with those white values rubbed off on those mixed people. Whereas the Asian background, which I like that you switched to Asian background, I like that you switched then, when you could have said Pakistani and Bangladeshi, if they were in fact what you're referring to when you say Asian. It's far too general. You need to be more localized because there's far too many different races in Asia. Not even a joke, this is silly. If you are at all interested in reading this, by all means do so. As far as I'm concerned, this now just shows to me how pathetic this was. An absolute waste of money. Quite frankly, I don't mind the idea of charities wanting to help people, I get it. But the moment you start to discriminate, you sow the seeds for racism. The moment you start telling people they are being discriminated against because of their race, you sow seeds of racism. You allow it to fester. You create the problem. Anyway, I know I've been quite active this week, and I'm going to try and continue that until Sunday. So I hope you all have a lovely day, and thank you all for listening.
I'm an alt-right furry